Hi, everyone, and welcome to the lineup. Today is September the 1st, 2022. I'm Barry Stagner and glad to have you with us again this evening. And if you hear a little background noise of all things here when we're bracing for a major heat wave in Southern California, last evening our air conditioner died. And so we're hoping to get it fixed quickly because the temps are supposed to go through the roof here by the weekend. And so I got a fan running in the background here in the studio instead of the AC. So forgive any background noise you may hear. But I've got some interesting stories this week. And I think the first one is rather curious because it does kind of address a question that I've often had in my mind regarding the interpretation of the Ezekiel war scenario and the people that are mentioned there, the names that are mentioned there. And one of the names that we associate with the nation of Russia is Rosh. And there's been some debate. And, you know, if you look at the King James translates the word Rosh or Rosh as a noun and not a proper name, where the New King James and other translations translate the word Rosh as a proper name. And thus that points to a nation by that name. Now we note that most of the nations named in Ezekiel 38 and 39 are found in the Table of Nations in Genesis, other than Gog and Rosh. And this is interesting because I've always looked at this association as being a bit curious because Rosh, seemed to always be the odd man out. There was a common element that all the other nations shared. Iran, Turkey, Libya, and Sudan are all radical Islamist nations, some more aggressive than others in their radicalness, so to speak. And but they all share that common feature. Now, Russia then, in my mind, was kind of the odd man out. And I always thought, well, maybe that leaves some room for looking at it through a different lens. But our first story is very curious regarding that particular passage and the role of Russia in the coming Ezekiel invasion. This article comes from Israel 365, and pardon me, it's hot already and very hot here in the studio, so bear with me, and we'll try to get through this. Israel 365 reports that Putin says Islam is our partner in the New World Order. Now, let me read that again. I just about fell out of my chair when I read that. Putin says Islam is our partner in the New World Order. Well, there are those who have aspirations for a New World Order and a great reset to bring it about and all these other things, but Putin's got his own. And that is interesting because we know that Turkey has their own, Iran has their own, and Libya and Sudan are going to associate with one or the other, probably whoever tries to move forward or most successfully moves forward in the advancement of either their caliphate or their controlled empire like that of the Ottoman Empire when Turkey was a global power, a regional power, I should say. But the article says on Monday, Russian President Vladimir Putin sent a message of greetings to the participants and guests of the 2022 Kazan Global Youth Summit as it opened in Kazan. The event was hosted by the Organization of Islamic Cooperation, or the OIC. Islamic states have been our traditional partners in addressing many topical issues on the regional and global agenda and attempts to build a more just and democratic world order. Can you imagine saying that about Islam? Which, remember, the word Islam means submission, and the implication being submission by sword or by force. And but Putin, with this extremist ideology and religion, is saying that he's partnering with them to bring a more just and democratic world order. And when you've got executions taking place in these countries with people, somebody was just sentenced in Saudi Arabia for 47 years of prison because of her comments on social media. And that's the just and the world order we want to bring about. Just very shocking and bizarre statements coming from him. Putin said in a short address, "It's significant that young people are getting more actively involved in this constructive and comprehensive cooperation. The Kazan Global Youth Summit is organized for young Muslim people to keep them informed and facilitate interaction with other regions and cultures. Putin is strongly aligned with the Russian Orthodox Church, which supports him in his war in Ukraine, but he has both domestic and foreign interest in allying with Islam. Russia has the largest Muslim population in Europe, numbering approximately 14 million, or roughly 10% of the total population, recognized under the law and by Russian political leaders as one of Russia's traditional religions. Islam is part of Russian historical heritage and is subsidized by the Russian government. The position of Islam as a major Russian religion alongside Orthodox Christianity dates from the time of Catherine the Great, who sponsored Islamic clerics and scholarship. And President Putin consolidated this trend, subsidizing the creation of mosque and Islamic education, which he called an integral part of Russia's cultural code, encouraging immigration from Muslim-majority former Soviet blocs and condemning the anti-Muslim hate speech. Well, this displays a huge, I guess, just lack of understanding of what Islam is all about. I think I should probably just use the word, it exposes his complete ignorance about Islam and Sharia law and the fact that Islam is a governmental system. It's not simply a religious ideology. It has its own system of government, and it has no place for governments like Putin's. And he's getting suckered in just like many of the people here in the West who talk about this peaceful religion. And yet here we can look in our immediate history and beyond and see that there's a direct and constant association with violence and hostility and the demeaning of women, all these other things. And yet here he says that it is central to building a more just and democratic world order. Well, there's no room for democracy in Islam there, bubs. So you better wake up and smell the coffee, so to speak. The Daily Wire says, quote, he's generating war in the Middle East. Ben Shapiro warns Biden is making Iraq an Iranian proxy. Daily Wire editor emeritus Ben Shapiro sharply criticized Joe Biden's coddling of Iran vis-a-vis the Iran nuclear deal, while warning of the rapidly deteriorating situation in Iraq, noting that Biden's policies toward Iran will turn Iraq into a full-scale Iranian proxy. On Tuesday, Shapiro began by showing footage of American helicopters evacuating the U.S. Embassy in Baghdad. Then he turned to a report in the Jerusalem Post that outlined the apparent deal Biden is willing to make with the largest state sponsor of terrorism on the planet, Iran's despotic and theocratic government. Shapiro pointed out that Biden's desperation to make a deal with the government that sees the deal as a hudna, a temporary stopgap maneuver, as a part of a long-term plan to develop nuclear weapons and upgrade their military weaponry. Joe Biden is going to give them all of that, Shapiro declared. What's happening in Iraq, in order to understand that, you have to understand what Joe Biden is doing in Iran right now. He's attempting to basically surrender to Iran. Shapiro quoted the Post report and asserted various steps likely inherent in the nuclear deal, including the U.S. removing all secondary sanctions on Iran and agreed upon terrorist designations. The U.S. lifting the conventional arms embargo on Iran 165 days into the deal, limitations on advanced centrifuges research and development starting to expire in 2024, and the snapback sanctions mechanism, which would permit re-implementation of sanctions if Iran violates the deal, expiring in 2025. We're at the end of 2022 already. And Shapiro goes on to say, so I notice that the calendar now says it's 2022. So in other words, limitations on advanced centrifuges disappear under this deal. In 2025, all the snapback sanctions disappear. In 2026, the limitations on using centrifuges, including advanced ones, begin to expire. By 2030, the Iran deal expires entirely. So it's 8 years of keeping the Iranians from seeking to blow Israel off the map. And by the way, that's not going to happen. That will never happen. Whether or not Iran gets nukes, they are not going to remove Israel. Amos has prophesied that once the Jews are back in their national homeland, they will not be uprooted again. And whoever comes at them, and from whatever direction they come at them, they will not be successful in their efforts to drive the Jews into the sea. Now, Shapiro goes on to say that means that Iran has the capacity to take in as much money as it could possibly want for everything. And what the United States and its allies received in return is nothing, effectively zero, because time continues to march forward and Iran continues to march forward. This is just madness. Shapiro pointed out that Iran's Shiite government would delight in dominating the Shia majority in Iraq. In early August, foreign policy noted of Iraqi Shiite cleric Muqtada al-Sadr, the leader of the bloc with the largest number of seats in Iraq's parliament. His chief inspiration is perhaps Iran's founder and most famous supreme leader, Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini. What we're watching right now is a slow motion collapse in Iraq that is going to eventually make it into a full-scale Iranian proxy, Shapiro warned. It's already sort of a quasi-Iranian proxy. It would be full-scale Iranian proxy. Meanwhile, Joe Biden is going to continue subsidizing the Iranian government to build up its arsenal in Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, and Yemen. Now, one thing we have to remember is that the second most mentioned place in the Bible behind Jerusalem is Iraq. And under Mesopotamia, remember Babylon's in Iraq, all these other things. And, somebody sent me a question this week and asking about ancient Babylon, if a literal Babylon is what's meant in Revelation 17 and 18. I don't believe so. There are those who do, but I don't believe that's the intent there. There's a political Babylon, which is a global system, and there's ecclesiastical Babylon, which is the world religious system during the tribulation. And I don't believe it's talking about a literal city. For Iraq to be the center of global commerce would take decades and beyond in order to have that kind of shift in the commerce of the whole of the world. So I don't see that being a possibility. But it is interesting that it is the second most mentioned place in the Bible, geographic location that is. And you have to wonder, when you read Ezekiel 38 and especially verse 8, where it talks about, many people, many other people groups that are involved in this besides the named ones that we have there, quite possible that under the name Persia, its proxies could be included, which would include Lebanon, which is on the north of Israel, the invasion direction, and as well as the other proxy, Syria, which is on the north of Israel. And the participation of Iraq would certainly play an interesting role in that. So, once again, here we've got our world in a situation where we have those in places of power who don't understand the rules of the game, and they have Western thinking that they apply to Middle Eastern cultures, and that just doesn't work. Never has, never will. Now, we've got some interesting stories this week, as I said at the outset, and curious some of the delusional thinking that we see in the world today. And I think all of us, any right-thinking person, understands that the safest place in the world should be inside a mother's womb for a baby to grow and develop and to be birthed. And, evidence in Scripture states that the Lord knows us in the mother's womb, which indicates that we are already a human being in the womb of a mother. And, interesting, Jesus said, as the Gospels record, to let the children come to me. Now, it's interesting that the word children there is not the usual word translated as children. There's actually a couple of words that are used, but one of the words when he says to let them come to me is brephos, which talks about a child inside the mother's womb. So he's saying, hey, let the pregnant women come to me, and, because they're bearing children. And it's not just a blob of tissue or, and again, just these things are it's hard to believe that people can be so, I don't know what it is. I would say stupid, but I think it's delusional would be the better term. And the Independent Journal Review says Pelosi claims opposing abortion, get this, is sinful. Opposing abortion is sinful. Well, sex outside of marriage is sinful, that's for sure, which is the cause for the vast majority of abortions, of people getting pregnant when they didn't want to. It's not because of rape and incest and all those other things, though those cases do happen. They are minuscule. A fraction of 1% are the actual cases of abortion that are based on the fact that someone was raped by their relative or just raped, period. And House Speaker Nancy Pelosi went after opponents of abortion, accusing them of being sinful. Pelosi made the comment during the roundtable on women's reproductive health at the University of California, San Francisco Mission Bay campus. And the fact that this is such an assault on women of color and women lower income families is just sinful. It's sinful, Pelosi said. She added, it's wrong that they would be able to say to women what they think women should be doing with their lives and their bodies. Well, got big news for you, Pelosi. That's not their body inside of their body. They are basically a human incubator raising inside of their womb another human body with its own DNA, distinct from the woman who is carrying that child. It's killing a child in the womb. It's not a question of what they're doing with their body. They already made that decision when they had sex outside of marriage. And, there are cases, I don't want to say there aren't, where a mother's life is in danger. And there are other cases where families will make this decision because they have too many kids and can't afford to raise them. And, it was rather interesting. I worked with a guy a long time ago, and he was announced to us as his coworkers that their seventh child was on the way. And one of the other younger guys that I worked with said, how are you going to do that? How are you going to raise 7 kids? And his answer kind of shocked me, just because it wasn't something I would expect from him, because he was a bit of a rowdy and drinker and all that stuff. And he said, the Lord will provide. The Lord always provides for children. So, again, just interesting. And, the adoption and all those other things that are rightful topics along with this. But to say that others are forcing women into some type of religious system of belief and making their will forced on these women against theirs. It says, she went on to say, listen to this statement. American women are not as free as their mothers and their grandmothers were. They're not as free. And abortion wasn't rampant back then either. In May, the Roman Catholic Archbishop of San Francisco directed priests to deny Pelosi communion because of her support for a woman's right to abortion. Archbishop Salvatore Cordileone tweeted after numerous attempts to speak with Speaker Pelosi to help her understand the great evil she is perpetrating, the scandal she is causing, and a danger to her own soul she is risking, I have determined that she is not to be admitted to Holy Communion. After numerous attempts to speak with her to help her understand the great evil, he went on to say, he just cannot in good conscience allow her to share in communion. And Pope Francis, one of the world's most vocal advocates of human dignity in every stage and condition of life, he decries what he evocatively calls the throwaway culture. Still, he gave Pelosi communion during her meeting with him in June. Faith is an important gift. Not everyone has it, but it is a path to so many other things, Pelosi said, while speaking to a crowd of ambassadors, Vatican officials, and others. And she identifies, that's an interesting word, choice of words, as Catholic. So again, Pelosi says to oppose abortion is sinful. The Independent Journal review says blackout risk prompts California officials to ask residents to avoid charging their electric vehicles. And we make no bones about the fact that we've got basically a lunatic in charge of California, and who under emergency rules has just basically become a dictator here in the state. And he keeps declaring and extending his authority under the banner of COVID and all the things that he initiated early on that are within the law and framework of the California system. But we just covered a story last week talking about the fact that he said by 2035, no more gasoline-powered engine car sales. And so what's he do this week? He asked residents to avoid charging their electric vehicles. Now, why? Because the system is going to shut down in the midst of this heat wave. We've got some major temps coming up this weekend in Death Valley. For those of you who have heard of that particular desert region, temps supposed to hit 125 over the weekend. And there are, I was telling my wife yesterday, I saw it was hot yesterday, it was mid-90s here and, along the coast of California, that's hot. And I saw a paramedic and fire truck pulled up behind a school bus and, had to wonder if one of the kids didn't get overheated because, school buses are not air conditioned nor do they have seat belts, which is probably one of the most ridiculous things that has ever been overlooked. But anyway, California says California officials are asking residents to avoid charging their electric vehicles amid the risk of a blackout. The California Independent System Operator issued a bulletin warning residents of blackouts, and in the bulletin issued Tuesday, the operator explained starting tomorrow through Thursday, California and the West are expecting extreme heat that is likely to strain the grid with increased energy demands, especially over the holiday weekend. Well, tomorrow through Thursday uh, is mild compared to what's going to happen over the weekend. We've got temperatures here. By the way, I'm 4 miles from the ocean, and that stabilizes our temps pretty good. And we don't usually hit these big high numbers or triple-digit numbers here, but we've got some big numbers coming up over the weekend, well into the 90s, and potentially hitting 100 degrees here in the OC. But the bulletin noted temperatures in Northern California are expected to be 10 to 20 degrees warmer than normal through September 6th. And Southern California will reportedly experience temperatures 10 to 18 degrees warmer than normal. And as a result, the power grid operators expect to call for Californians on Californians for voluntary energy conservation via flex alerts. According to the bulletin, during alerts, consumers are urged to reduce energy use from 4 to 9 p.m. when the system is most stressed because demand for electricity remains high and there's less solar energy available. It continues, the top 3 conservative actions are set thermostats at 78 degrees or higher, avoid using large appliances and charging electric vehicles, and turn off necessary lights. I'm sorry, I just turn off necessary lights. Now, why would you turn something off that's necessary? I think maybe unnecessary is what they were actually trying to say. The bulletin comes just a week after it was reported the state was expected to prohibit the sale of new gasoline-powered cars, as the IJR reported. Their rule would require 100% of all new cars sold in the state by 2035 to be free of fossil fuel emissions, chiefly responsible for warming the planet. Well, we're going to talk about that here in a couple of moments as well. A website called Just the News is reporting California lawmakers expand budget to help some out-of-state residents travel for abortion. Yes, that's right, Californians. The government has decided, the governor has decided, and as well as the state legislature, that they're going to spend your tax dollars and mine to pay for the travel expenses of people to come here and have an abortion from states that have made it illegal. California lawmakers could soon send a budget bill to Governor Gavin Newsom that would allow the state's abortion fund to assist some out-of-state residents seeking abortion access in California. Now, why in the world would we have an abortion fund? The measure contained in Health Omnibus Bill would administer grants from the state's Abortion Practical Support Fund to nonprofit organizations that specialize in assisting low-income abortion patients trying to obtain their services. The bill specifies that the funds can be used for certain expenses, including practical support services, defined in the bill as financial or in-kind assistance to help a patient obtain an abortion in California. And the budget trailer bill comes as California lawmakers and Newsom have vowed to expand abortion access as other states are increasing restrictions on abortion after the U.S. Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade. If the bill is passed, California will spend some of the $20 million set aside in the state budget for the Abortion Practical Support Fund to help pregnant residents of other states pay for their travel expenses to obtain an abortion in California. In the state budget signed by Newsom in June, money in the fund was restricted to help only California residents, not those traveling from other states, as previously reported by the AP. That changes, however, under updates made in the Health Omnibus Bill, and the updated language in the bill provides flexibility to address issues of both in and out-of-state travel to obtain an abortion. And again, it's just the kindness and the patience of God sometimes just blows my mind. And just to think that there are people out there that are so bent on destroying the lives of innocent little children in the womb that they would offer to finance it with tax dollars to people from other states so they could travel from a state where they have banned this heinous act. It's just a delusional world. And as Paul prophesied through his letters to um, the Thessaloniki Christians in First and Second Thessalonians, especially Second Thessalonians 2, there is a delusion that is coming, and like everything else, it begins before the tribulation and reaches its fulfillment during the tribulation, because they would not receive the love of the truth. They then believe the lie that the Antichrist will proclaim himself when the Antichrist proclaims himself to be God. Now, Fox News says Fed seized enough fentanyl to kill 42 million people. That's right. 42 million people near the border in Arizona. Tucson Sector Border Patrol agents arrested a woman and seized 187 pounds of fentanyl. Officials say the quantity of drugs is sufficient to kill up to 42 million people. And Tucson Sector Chief Patrol Agent John R. Modlin credited observant Ajo Station agents with discovering 187 pounds of fentanyl during a traffic stop on Interstate 8 in Arizona. Officials estimate the value of the deadly drugs to be approximately $4.3 million. Ajo Station agents patrolling Interstate 8 near mile marker 115 stopped a white Chevy Equinox in the eastbound lane. During an interview with the driver, a U.S. citizen, agents observed several duffel bags in the rear cargo area. According to information obtained from Tucson sector officials, agents say the woman appeared to be noticeably nervous during the interview. The agents obtained consent for a search of the vehicle from the driver. During the search, they opened the bags, found they contained 340 packages wrapped in black tape and cellophane. The packages were coated in axle grease in an attempt to mask the scent from the drugs from canine searches. Agents said the packages contained 187 pounds of fentanyl pills and estimated the value again at $4.3 million. Just amazing to see what's happening in our world, and fentanyl is just killing people right and left here in our country, and number one killer of people between the ages of 18 and 25 over the past couple of years. And just stunning to see what's happening in our world. Things are growing worse and worse, as the Bible says they would, and therefore we have to keep looking up. Our redemption is indeed nigh. And the Associated Press says poll worker goes to wipe down voting machine, discovers haunting forward message on the screen. Now, this is very troubling, especially with the midterms on the way. And, people are on either side of the issue, regarding the voting and the 2020 election and all that stuff. But this is interesting. And on the last day of voting in Colorado's June primary, a poll worker sent to wipe down a voting machine, again, because of COVID concerns, found a concerning error message on its screen. USB device change detected. The machine used to mark ballots electronically was taken out of use, and an investigation has been launched. The message raised concerns that a voter had tried to tamper with it by inserting an off-the-shelf thumb drive, and the incident heightened concerns among election officials and security experts that some voters would try to meddle with or even attempt to sabotage election equipment. Well, I don't think it's just the everyday voter they need to be worried about. Even unsuccessful breaches, like the apparent one in the county of South Colorado Springs, could become major problems in the November general election, when the turnout will be greater and the stakes are higher. Activists who promote the idea that the 2020 election had some integrity issues contend that electronic voting machines are being manipulated. Well, why not? Everything else is. They can hack into pretty much everything. If they can hack into the Pentagon, then they can pretty much get into anything if they are determined to. They specially targeted equipment made by Dominion Voting Systems, which has filed several defamation lawsuits and said that the post-election reviews in state after state have shown its tallies to be accurate. This is yet another example of how lies about Dominion have damaged our company and diminished the credibility of U.S. elections, company spokeswoman Stephanie Wallstrom said in a statement to the AP. Now, I don't know. I think this whole idea of the potential, the votes that disappeared and then appeared, and all these other stories that we saw in the 2020 election, I find it hard to believe that Joe Biden got more votes than Barack Obama, who is extremely popular. And I think probably one of the biggest tells about the State of the Union, the Union meaning the United States of America, is that 80 million people would vote for this guy. And that's extremely troubling and says a lot about society today. The Daily Caller says hospital that promoted disputed puberty blocker study tried to hide mistakes and avoid questions. Dr. Kerry Mendoza said the mismatch between the study's results and how it was sold to the public raises serious concerns about the risks of allowing scientific research on complex issues to be driven by political or ideological concerns rather than a search for truth. The University of Washington and Seattle Children's Hospital conspired to cover their tracks after falsely claiming their study had found that puberty blockers and cross-sex hormones improved mental health for transgender use, according to emails obtained by Jason Rance. UW and SCH spokespeople agreed not to correct inaccurate news articles that were written based off their press release and to ignore questions from outlets they characterized as conservative, including the Daily Caller, News Foundation, and independent journalist Jesse Singal published a thorough critique of the study and the UW press release, University of Washington. UW had claimed their February study found that puberty blockers and cross-sex hormones cause rates of depression to plummet among trans youth, when based off their own data, depression only decreased 1 percentage point for that group and no causal relationship was established. I can't overemphasize how much cover was provided to UW by the fact that after my initial article, it was only conservative outlets that reached out about this scandal, Singal wrote. And again, this is exactly what you see in totalitarian societies or socialist governmental systems, communists and all that, is controlling the narrative. And state-run media only putting out there the propaganda that you want to advance your particular ideology or cause. And again, I think we need to remember what Jesus had to say about those who cause children to stumble. And giving a child who is too young to understand anything about sex, who hasn't even reached puberty, because if you've reached puberty, why would they give you puberty blockers? They're trying to block puberty. If you're a young child who has no concept of sexual relationships or activity, or any of those things, and they're basically making the decision that they like to play, that little girl likes to play army, so she must be a boy, so let's block her puberty and all these other things, and the great harm they're doing. And I think we would do well to remember that Jesus said, causing children to stumble, it's better for you to have a millstone hung around your neck and you to be thrown into the sea than to cause these children to stumble. And of course, the application there is spiritual in nature, but the Lord loves children, and He describes what a blessing they are, and how happy is the one whose quiver is full of children, and what an awesome and wonderful inheritance they are from the Lord. And so the Lord's attitude towards this, again, His patience is on full display in things like this, but His patience is limited. And there is coming a time where all these people are going to answer to Him for these things. And, of course, the Lord said in the Proverbs that 24, don't rejoice when your enemy stumbles, lest it displease the Lord and He turn away His wrath from him. And, we certainly don't want to be, celebrating the consequences that await these people. They need Jesus, and that's the only way they're going to turn around and get away from this delusional thinking. But here we are living in perilous times where delusion abounds, and all these just bizarre things coming out of people who are in control of our educational system and our commercial system and governmental system. And we're just a mess. And that's exactly what the Bible said it would be in the last days. Now, here's another one from my home state. Town Hall reports California becomes a sanctuary state for trans as children taking puberty blockers increased nearly 270%. Now, think about our last article. They're lying about the results of taking these puberty blockers, and the use is up 270%. The woke state of California advanced a bill to make it a sanctuary for transgender kids and their parents. In a 48-16 vote, Senator Scott Wiener, a Democrat from California, announced the legislation that will protect and grant refuge to transgender children and their parents who flee conservative states such as Texas for California. This comes as Republican-led states are restricting sex change surgeries and hormone blockers for minors. Trans kids and their parents are being criminalized and used as political punching bags by right-wing zealots. No one should ever have to worry about being separated from their child simply for allowing that child to be who they are. Well, listen, who they are is what their DNA says they are and what their chromosomal arrangement says they are, not what they think or feel. That doesn't determine uh, your gender or your sex, which cannot be changed. Nothing changes genetically through these surgeries. It's just an appearance, cosmetic, if you will, and does nothing to turn someone into the opposite sex. But again, California leading the charge in these just bizarre and heinous behaviors. Statistics provided to Fox News Digital by Florida's Agency for Healthcare Administration revealed that the number of children receiving behavioral therapy to treat gender dysphoria increased by 63% from 2017 to 2021. That's because our school systems are feeding this to them, telling them that they can make a decision in this area, confusing kids instead of educating them, indoctrinating kids instead of teaching them the three R's, the old, I can't remember what the three R's are: reading, writing, and arithmetic. Sorry. And again, this article goes on to say there's been an alarming increase of patients as young as 16 years old receiving irreversible surgical procedures to treat gender dysphoria. Again, just heinous, absolutely unbelievable that this is the world we live in. Now, here's another interesting story. It's fallen under the banner of conspiracy theories, but that's not the heading that should be above this article or any other like it. Zero Hedge reports another U.S. food processing plant catches fire, and add this to the growing list. Another food processing plant went up in flames last weekend. Add this poultry business in California to the growing list of U.S. food plants that have been knocked offline in the past year due to, quote, accidental fires, end quote. LA-based KTLA reported of a QC poultry processing plant in Montebello, California, located just east of LA and southwest of San Gabriel, caught fire around 1600 local time Sunday or 4 p.m. Firefighters responded to the large industrial plant as heavy smoke billowed from the roof, and firefighters began to deploy. The fire was upgraded to a 3-alarm commercial fire, and firefighters initially took a defensive stance and held the fire from spreading to any nearby structures, Montebello Fire Department said. And the fire was declared knocked down by 2:20 local time. KTLA said there was no damage to other building structures nearby, and the fire's cause is unknown. While the fire seems insignificant, it's a part of a much larger issue of a spat of mysterious fires taking out America's food supply chain one by one over the last year. A list tallied in June reveals a couple dozen or more food processing plants that have caught fire. Now, excuse me, I meant to grab this off my printer a few moments ago, but I want to show you something. This is, and I'm not going to read them all, but that last paragraph of the article talking about the number of incidents related to our food supply chain that have happened in the last year. This is the cover story, but I want you to see this, and this, let me read a couple of them. Fire destroyed a food processing plant in Fayetteville. A fire ignited at Smithfield Foods pork processing plant in Monmouth, Illinois. Kellogg plant in Memphis, Tyson's River Valley ingredients plant in Hanceville, Alabama. Paddock Meat Production Company in Austell. I'm not sure where that is. Fire at the JBS Beef Plant, Grand Island, Nebraska. Darigold Butter Production Plant, fire. This is all within the last year. Garrett County Food Pantry, fire broke out there. Maid-Rite Steak Company, Meat Processing, West Side Food Processing Plant. It goes on and on. And listen, this is what I wanted you to see. And it's not just all destruction of plants, even though the first 2 pages are. These are 281,000 chickens destroyed, 5,000,000, 11,700 chickens destroyed, 76,400 turkeys destroyed, 208,900 turkeys destroyed in Minnesota, uh, 89,700 chickens destroyed in Wayne, North Carolina, 1,746,900 chickens destroyed at a egg farm in Dixon, Nebraska, 1,380,500 chickens destroyed at an egg farm in Lancaster, Minnesota. And this goes on and on and on. There's 97 food-related events in the U.S. in the last year. And again, a lot of people are, oh, there's conspiracy theory and all that stuff. No, it's happening. These are all validated or verified news stories, and it is taking place. Now, I do want to talk about this for a moment, and in a moment, and last couple of stories. And another interesting thing that I follow the National Oceanic Atmospheric Administration's website. The National Hurricane page is basically what it is. For the last 2 months, there hasn't been one single named storm in the United States yet. Here, we read about in Pakistan, there's flooding there that has killed 1,000 people so far. And so weather extremes are happening all over the world. There's torrential rain in some parts of our own country. Other countries around the world are experiencing these weather anomalies. And what we need to remember is that when Jesus was talking in Matthew 24:3-8, he used the English translated Bibles used the word earthquake. He talked about the false Christ, the wars and rumors of wars, the ethnic tensions, the pestilence, the famine, all these other things. And then he said earthquakes in diverse places. And the word earthquake comes from the Greek term seismos, where obviously we get our word seismology. But the interesting thing about seismos is it's not limited to geological events. It can include atmospheric events because the word can also be translated as a gale or a tempest. So basically what Jesus is saying, in the last days, in a birth pang-like progression, there will be weather extremities that are unusual, and they will become, like birth pangs, more frequent and more intense. And we're seeing that happen now with these weather extremes that are happening all over the world. The AP says UN Weather Agency predicts a rare triple dip La Nina in 2022. The UN Weather Agency is predicting that the phenomenon known as La Nina, or the little girl, is poised to last through the end of the year. A mysterious triple dip, the first of this century, caused by 3 straight years of effect on climate patterns like drought and flooding worldwide. The World Meteorological Organization, on Wednesday said La Nina conditions, which involve a large-scale cooling of ocean surface temperatures, have strengthened in the eastern and central equatorial Pacific with an increase in trade winds in recent weeks. The agency's top official was quick to caution that the triple dip doesn't mean global warming is easing. Well, of course it doesn't. The ocean is cooling. That doesn't change anything. It's exceptional to have 3 consecutive years with a La Nina event. Its cooling influence is temporarily slowing the rise in global temperatures, but it will not halt or reverse the long-term warming trend, Secretary General Petteri Talas said. La Nina is a natural and cyclical cooling parts of the equatorial Pacific that changes weather patterns worldwide, as opposed to warming caused by the better-known El Nino, the opposite phenomenon. That's the little boy. La Nina often leads to more Atlantic hurricanes, less rain, and more wildfires. Now, I just mentioned a moment ago that we haven't had any named storms in July or August, and yet La Nina leads to more Atlantic hurricanes, less rain, and more wildfires in the western United States. We haven't had any hurricanes. We haven't even had any named tropical storms in the past 2 months. Studies have shown La Nina is more expensive to the United States than the El Nino, which generally causes significant amounts of rainfall. Now, here's what's interesting. The Motherboard, again, a website, reports that cascading climate disasters can destabilize entire socio-economic systems, study finds. Climate change is making extreme weather events such as hurricanes, heat waves, floods, and droughts much more intense. Not only does this trend threaten people and ecosystems around the world, but a new study concludes that it could destabilize entire societies. Extreme heat and drought, which frequently overlap in our warming world, can produce cascading impacts that propagate through numerous sectors with far reaching consequences, potentially being able to destabilize entire socio-economic systems, according to a study published on Wednesday in PLOS Climate. Researchers led by Laura Nigli, a PhD student in glaciology and geomorphodynamics at the University of Zurich, reached this conclusion after examining 8 concurrent heat and drought events in Europe, Africa, and Australia that have occurred within the past 2 decades. The team analyzed how these double whammies affected human communities and supply chains and found that they had the most serious impact on health, energy, and agriculture and food production sectors. Now, pair this together with what we just read a moment ago about all of these um, food supply chain interruptions, the fires destroying these food processing plants, as well as the destruction of millions and millions of poultry, be they turkeys or chickens, and the beef was thrown in there too in some of these articles. But, the thing I think we need to recognize about this whole trend that's happening with, the under the climate change umbrella is that there are going to be cataclysmic weather-related events during the tribulation period. And if you look at what's happening in the four horsemen of the apocalypse, there's going to be massive famine, and the food supply is going to dwindle down to next to nothing, to where just a single day's or single meal will cost basically a day's pay. And so, looking at these things and recognizing that we are headed toward a period of divine judgment as God judges the world for the rejection of Christ, and also finishes his discipline of Israel for their rejection of Christ, leading to them in as Zechariah 12:10 says, to look upon the one whom they pierced and mourn for him as one mourns for their only son. So again, here's another element that is moving in that direction. And could it be that all these things we're seeing that are flying under the banner of climate change are actually the Lord and what he has foretold beginning to happen that will reach its fulfillment during the tribulation? Everything else is moving in that direction. Everything else we mentioned, the pestilence on the increase, wars and rumors of wars are on the increase in a birth pang-like progression. Ethnic tensions are on the rise in a birth pang-like progression. False Christ and phony religious systems are on the increase in a birth pang-like progression. So why would we not expect earthquakes and atmospheric events to happen in that same manner? And indeed they are. Everybody keeps trying to say fossil fuels and all this stuff, is to blame. And this is what's pushing the agenda of Gavin Newsom and others to rid the world of any type of petroleum-based products that are in a car's engine, and move strictly over to electric powered, which they can't even handle right now. The truth is, I think the world is moving towards the catastrophes of the tribulation, and it is even at the door. Now, I'll remind you that the Great Escape precedes the Great Tribulation. So we can be looking up and should be looking up with hopeful eyes for that glorious appearing of our great God and Savior, Jesus Christ. And in the meantime, there is much for us to do. Many people who need to hear the gospel of Christ and come to saving faith. And we got to keep throwing those seeds out there. And some will reject it, as we talked about before. Some will spring up and say, sounds good to me. And then because of tribulation based on the word of God, they'll fall away. And all these things are realities regarding the gospel message. But some people are going to receive it, and then they'll be found worthy to escape the things that are coming up upon the world and be kept from the hour of trial, as Revelation 3:10 says, that is coming upon the earth. So that's it for this week. And, I think if we're going to say have a takeaway this week, we can add what they're calling climate change and all these weather anomalies to the precursors to the tribulation. And things that are going to happen, that are happening in preparation for those things: the famine, the atmospheric events, the geological events, wars and rumors of wars, all reaching their ultimate fulfillment during the tribulation. All of them also beginning before the tribulation, because the tribulation is such a brief time span, it won't have time to develop then. It has to develop beforehand. And that's what we're seeing now. So, well, that's it for this week. And pray the Lord bless you and encourage you during these trying and perilous times, and recognize that God is still for us. He is still with us. He's on our side. And we can continue to stand, having done all to stand, even in these last and trying days where people with just lunatic thinking are in charge of what's happening in our schools and in our country and in our world. But Jesus is coming soon. Look up, for your redemption is nigh. Well, that's it for this week. So pray you have, again, a blessed week, and we'll see you here, there, or in the air. God bless.